The soft hum of city lights spilled into the apartment through the balcony doors, washing the room in a gentle glow that contrasted sharply with the storm raging behind Mrs. Patricia Johnson's eyes. She had spent the day weaving herself into the life of her son and his family, an intricate tapestry of smiles, handshakes, and carefully measured warmth. Each laugh she shared with Victory, every compliment she offered Lilith, was a thread in the grand design she had meticulously plotted. But beneath the elegance of her gestures, beneath the veneer of a grandmother's love, lurked a dark, calculated intent that no one, least of all Philip or Lilith, suspected. As she reclined in the leather chair of her mansion that evening, the same chair that had borne witness to decades of power and influence, she allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The apartment visits had been a resounding success. She had cried, begged, and confessed, all in perfect, measured doses that tugged at the hearts of her unsuspecting family. Victory had even hugged her without hesitation, a moment of innocent trust that she intended to exploit. Yes, she thought, rubbing her hands together, the stage was set. The wedding, the ultimate display of unity, would soon provide the final act of her masterstroke. Outside the mansion, the moon hung high, casting its silver gaze across the meticulously landscaped grounds. Patricia watched it from her window, the reflection in the glass showing a woman who seemed fragile, remorseful, human. But the woman reflected was an illusion. Beneath the delicate facade was a storm, coiled and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She poured herself a glass of whiskey, savoring the burn, letting it fuel the cold fire in her chest. One sip, she reminded herself, and the path to reclaiming what she believed was rightfully hers was almost complete. 2 months had passed since that fraught first visit, and every encounter since had been a meticulously choreographed performance. She had learned their routines, studied their reactions, memorized the smallest details of their lives. She knew the moment Lilith laughed, the precise way Philip's hand brushed Victory's hair, the softness in his gaze when he caught Lilith in a quiet, vulnerable moment. Each observation was a piece of ammunition, each memory a tool she could wield when the time came. And now, as the wedding date loomed just 3 months away, the sense of anticipation was intoxicating. Patricia traced the rim of her glass absent-mindedly, imagining the scene. The beach, the sun setting in fiery streaks across the horizon, the champagne glinting in crystal flutes. Lilith would raise her glass, toast to a future that Patricia had no intention of letting unfold. That drink would be poisoned. One sip, and everything would crumble. She envisioned Philip's face, twisted between grief and horror. Victory would never know the grandmother she had so recently embraced. The family she had infiltrated would dissolve in a single, calculated instant. But for all her plotting, a flicker of impatience gnawed at her. Patience had always been her ally, but now the slow passage of weeks felt almost cruel. She stood abruptly, the heels of her designer pumps clicking across the marble floor, echoing like a countdown in the silent mansion. Her reflection in the long hallway mirror caught her attention, and she paused, studying the lines of her face. There was weariness there, yes, but also a ruthless clarity. The old Mrs. Patricia Johnson, the one capable of bending people to her will without a second thought, still existed, concealed beneath the veneer of contrition. That woman was never gone. She had only been waiting for the right moment to return. Meanwhile, in the Lecky apartment, life went on with a rhythm that Patricia's intrusion could never truly disrupt, though she would try. Victory, blissfully unaware of the dark currents weaving around her family, danced across the living room in her morning routine, twirling like the sunbeam that followed her small feet. Lilith was at the kitchen counter, gently stirring a bowl of oatmeal, her thoughts half on the recipe and half on the approaching wedding. Philip had already left for work, though the tension in his shoulders remained from the visit the night before, the lingering doubt about his mother's sincerity never fully leaving him. Lilith watched Victory carefully, brushing a stray ribbon from her daughter's hair. The little girl's laughter, pure and unrestrained, was both a balm and a warning. Lilith knew that happiness could be fragile, that joy could be as easily crushed as the delicate porcelain teacups she sometimes set on the counter. And sometimes, in quiet moments, a shadow would cross her mind, an echo of the fear she had carried for years. That shadow was now embodied in the woman who had wormed her way back into their lives. Victory noticed the thoughtful pause of her mother and skipped over, tugging at her sleeve. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked innocently. Her eyes were wide, bright, and trusting. Lilith crouched down, smiling softly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes entirely. "I'm fine, sweetie," she said, brushing Victory's hair behind her ears. "Just thinking about how beautiful the wedding is going to be." Victory's grin returned, radiant and infectious. "I can't wait." "Grandma Pat said she's going to help me pick my dress." She spun around, twirling as if the very idea of choice was a magic spell. Lilith's heart clenched slightly. She wanted to feel joy, to bask in the innocence of her daughter's excitement. But a kernel of unease had settled deep in her chest. The days passed in a blur of wedding plans and careful interactions with Mrs. Patricia. Each meeting, each phone call, each seemingly innocent gesture from Patricia reinforced her position in the family. Yet Lilith could not ignore the subtle inconsistencies. The way Patricia's eyes occasionally darkened when she thought no one was looking, the tiny smirk that appeared when she believed Lilith was distracted, the slightly too tight grip on Victory's hand. And then came the day Lilith had been waiting for, the bridal gown fitting. The boutique smelled of lavender and silk, a quiet sanctuary of femininity and elegance. Lilith stepped into the first gown, a flowing creation of ivory and delicate lace. She twirled, the fabric catching the soft lighting of the boutique. Patricia clapped softly, a warm, encouraging smile painted across her face. "Absolutely stunning, Lilith. Philip will be speechless." Lilith smiled politely, her mind scanning Patricia's face for the subtle cues she had come to watch for. Nothing yet, she thought, but the seeds of suspicion were planted deeper than ever. Patricia had been patient, meticulous, and calculating, qualities that, when cloaked in benevolence, could be devastating. Lilith knew that she could not let her guard down, not for 1 second. Victory, perched on a stool beside them, squealed with delight. "Mommy, I like that one. It's so pretty. Can Grandma Pat help me pick mine too?" Patricia's hands hovered over the small pile of children's dresses. She smiled at Victory, a grandmotherly glow that could have convinced anyone of her sincerity. "Of course, darling. Let's find the perfect dress for you two." But behind that smile, her mind raced, calculating. Each step of the wedding, each joyful moment, was just a stage in her grand design. The poison bottle rested safely in her drawer, a silent sentinel awaiting the toast. She would wait. She would watch. And when the time came, all the carefully constructed happiness of this family would shatter like fragile glass beneath her hands. As the fitting concluded and they left the boutique, the city streets bathed in the amber light of dusk, Patricia remained outwardly cheerful, engaging in conversation with Lilith, Victory chattering beside her. But the shadows in her eyes deepened with anticipation. This dance of appearances had carried her this far, and it would carry her to the moment of ultimate control. Lilith noticed nothing of the storm brewing beneath the calm surface. She felt hope, a cautious optimism she allowed herself to feel only in fragments. She had learned that trust could be extended, but not fully granted, not when the past was as volatile as the present. Yet still, she allowed Patricia's presence, the small kindnesses, the gestures of a grandmother who seemed to genuinely care. Meanwhile, Patricia's mind wandered to the inevitable confrontation at the wedding. She envisioned the guests, the clinking of glasses, the sun dipping below the horizon, the golden sand reflecting the last light of day. Lilith would raise her glass in celebration, and Patricia would seize the moment. One sip, she mused, and the entire vision would collapse. Philip's face, twisted in disbelief, Lilith's last breaths, Victory's confused tears, it would all unfold according to her plan. The ultimate triumph of cunning, patience, and control. She returned to the mansion that evening, walking through the halls with the grace of a queen returning to her throne. Every step echoed in the cavernous spaces, each click of her heels a metronome counting down to the day of reckoning. In her private chambers, she removed her jewelry, changed into silk pajamas, and poured herself a final drink. Sitting by the window, she stared at the city below, lights twinkling like distant stars, and whispered to herself, a cruel lullaby in the quiet night. Soon, Lilith, soon, your happiness will belong to me. The wind rattled the windows softly, as if in warning, but Patricia paid no heed. In her mind, she had already won. The family had embraced the illusion she had masterfully created, and nothing, no love, no laughter, no bond, would be strong enough to withstand the storm she had planned. The game had begun, and Mrs. Patricia Johnson was always the last player standing. The weeks that followed unfolded like a delicate dance, with Patricia Johnson weaving herself deeper into the fabric of her son's life. Every visit, every carefully chosen gesture, was a thread in a web so intricate that even the sharpest eyes could be fooled. She arrived at the Lecky apartment with a basket of flowers or a freshly baked pie, presenting herself as the repentant, fragile mother who had rediscovered the value of family. Yet behind the warmth, behind the perfumed smiles and the gentle touch on Victory's hair, there simmered a cold, deliberate intent that could turn the entire family's world upside down in a heartbeat. Lilith had grown wary. Though she tried to embrace the apparent sincerity of Patricia's apologies, the faint shadows that flickered across her face in the corner of her eye never escaped Lilith's notice. The woman's hands lingered too long when touching Victory. The way her smile hardened when she thought Lilith wasn't looking, the subtle way her eyes shifted when mentioning the mansion, all of it whispered of a deeper, unspoken agenda. Lilith couldn't shake the feeling that the peace they had cautiously built was merely a surface calm, ready to be shattered. Philip, meanwhile, oscillated between relief and vigilance. He wanted desperately to believe in the redemption of the woman who had raised him, the woman whose iron grip and cold calculations had forced him and Lilith into a life of struggle and fear. But the lingering bitterness, the scars of years of mistrust, were not so easily erased. He watched his mother during their visits with an almost forensic intensity, studying the way her gaze followed Victory as she danced, or how her laughter sometimes carried a shade too sharp to be genuine. Despite the tension, daily life pressed forward. Wedding preparations continued, each task carefully layered to create an air of joyous anticipation. Invitations were sent, guest lists finalized, seating charts painstakingly drawn. Every detail was meant to celebrate love, to cement family bonds. But Patricia viewed each moment through a lens of manipulation and control. The boutique fittings, the cake tastings, the floral arrangements, all were opportunities to study her enemies, to understand their habits, and to identify the most vulnerable moments when her plan could be executed flawlessly. One evening, as the city was swallowed in the soft indigo of twilight, Patricia returned to the apartment, her presence cloaked in warmth and apparent contrition. Victory ran to greet her, the little girl's excitement untainted by suspicion. "Grandma Pat, look, I picked this ribbon for my dress," she exclaimed, spinning in the tiny circle she had made in the living room. Patricia crouched to meet her granddaughter at eye level, her smile radiant and soft. "It's beautiful, Victory. You have such a wonderful eye for color." She gently adjusted the ribbon, making the gesture seem natural, tender. In reality, Patricia's mind was already racing, cataloging every movement, every expression, analyzing the perfect moment to strike. Lilith and Philip watched from the kitchen, sharing a look that carried unspoken concern. Lilith whispered under her breath, "She's too perfect. It doesn't feel right." Philip nodded, muscles tense. "We keep her close for now, but we don't let our guard down." His hand brushed hers in silent solidarity. The instinct to protect his family warred against his desire to believe in his mother's transformation. The following week, Patricia suggested an afternoon outing to the botanical gardens. The family hesitated, but ultimately agreed. It was a seemingly innocent gesture, a mother wanting to share the beauty of flowers with her daughter and granddaughter. Victory ran ahead, her laughter ringing like silver bells through the manicured paths. Lilith trailed close behind, keeping a watchful eye on both her daughter and Patricia. Philip's expression was guarded, his jaw tight as he scanned the surroundings for anything unusual. Patricia, walking slightly behind, let her gaze drift, observing the soft curves of the garden, the vibrant colors of the blossoms, but always returning to the family, calculating, memorizing. She noted the moments Lilith lowered her guard, the way Philip's arm instinctively encircled his daughter, and even the fleeting glances shared between the couple, each detail recorded for future use. Her smile remained flawless, the gentle laughter and murmurs of approval performed with the precision of a seasoned actress. Yet, despite her outward control, there were moments when the old fire flared beneath the surface. When Victory laughed too freely, when Lilith leaned into Philip for comfort, when the child's innocence reminded Patricia of the years stolen from her son's life. Those moments ignited a pang of frustration. The world she had once ruled with subtle cruelty now threatened to escape her grasp, and the thought of reclaiming it, of orchestrating the perfect undoing, sent a shiver of excitement through her. Back at the mansion, Patricia spent hours in her private study, reviewing every aspect of the wedding she had helped plan. Invitations, seating arrangements, catering schedules, all meticulously cataloged, all stored as reference for her coming strike. Her fingers hovered over her desk, resting near the small, unassuming bottle of clear liquid. It was her ultimate weapon, silent and deadly, ready to dismantle the family's happiness with a single act. The knowledge of its power thrilled her, a dangerous delight that she carefully contained behind a veneer of polite sophistication. Days later, during a brunch at the apartment, Patricia offered a toast for the upcoming nuptials. Crystal flutes clinked together, laughter echoing warmly in the sunlit room. Lilith, unaware of the shadow looming behind her mother-in-law's presence, lifted her glass with a bright smile. To love, to family, and to new beginnings, she said. Patricia's smile was sweet, almost maternal, her glass raised gracefully. To new beginnings, she echoed, her eyes briefly glinting with something that no one in the room could decipher. One day, she reminded herself, this toast would become the catalyst for everything she had long planned, the moment where her carefully cultivated illusion would give way to devastating reality. As the days blurred into weeks, the family began to relax. Patricia's calculated appearances, the steady rhythm of her visits, and the carefully crafted acts of kindness created a false sense of trust. Victory adored her grandmother, Lilith cautiously softened, and even Philip allowed himself to feel, perhaps for the first time in years, that maybe, just maybe, his mother had changed. But beneath the surface, currents of suspicion ran deep. Lilith kept her instincts sharp, noting the slight hesitations in Patricia's speech, the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way her eyes would linger a fraction too long on Victory. Every interaction was cataloged and analyzed, a defense mechanism against the woman who had once wielded fear like a weapon. Meanwhile, Patricia remained the picture of patience and contrition. Every smile, every compliment, every moment of apparent humility was a deliberate choice, a calculated move in a game of power and deceit. She had woven herself into the family, gaining access, trust, and proximity, everything she needed to execute the final act of her plan. The poison remained untouched, but ever present in her thoughts, a silent promise of control waiting for the perfect hour. One quiet evening, as the city lights flickered through the apartment windows and the gentle hum of life continued outside, Patricia's voice was soft as she spoke to Victory. Grandma Pat loves you so much, my little star. You're going to be the most beautiful flower on that beach. Victory beamed, unconsciously reinforcing the illusion Patricia relied upon. She hugged her tightly, planting the seeds of familiarity and affection, ensuring that the child's trust would blind her to the danger lurking behind the smile. Philip, standing at the edge of the room, watched silently, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe in the woman who had once been his mother, who now claimed redemption and love. Yet the memory of years of pain and fear was a shadow that refused to be erased. He could only hope that his instincts, finally honed by experience and loss, would protect his family when the time came. As the night deepened, Patricia returned to her mansion, the empty halls echoing with her heels like the ticking of a clock counting down to inevitability. She poured herself a drink, the amber liquid reflecting the cold glint of ambition in her eyes. Sitting alone, she traced the outline of the bottle, her thoughts consumed by the coming wedding. Every detail, every nuance, every emotion of the day was meticulously planned in her mind. Soon, she whispered into the darkness, her words both a promise and a threat. Soon, they will see who truly holds the power. Outside, the world slept, oblivious to the storm brewing in the quiet corners of a family's life. In the apartment, Lilith checked on Victory, a mother's vigilance tempered by cautious hope. Philip, restless, gazed out the window, the city stretching endlessly beneath him, unaware of the shadow gathering closer, a presence both familiar and sinister, waiting to strike at the moment of ultimate trust. And somewhere in the silence of the mansion, Patricia Johnson smiled, cold, calculated, and unstoppable. The game had begun, and she was the master of its unfolding. The coastal city shimmered under a golden dawn as the wedding drew ever closer, each day bringing the family closer to the beach where vows and promises would soon be exchanged. Yet behind the idyllic preparation and the laughter that echoed through the Lecky apartment, a tension simmered, almost imperceptible but ever-present, a thread of unease that seemed to tug at the edges of every joyful moment. Lilith moved through her morning with a practiced air of calm, though her mind was far from peaceful. Victory, excited beyond measure, chattered incessantly about the beach, the sun, and the dresses she had chosen. "Mommy, will Grandma Pat be there?" Victory asked, tugging on Lilith's hand as they walked toward the kitchen. Lilith froze for a brief moment, her gaze flicking to the empty living room where Patricia had once stood, a seemingly benign presence now lingering in memory. "Yes, sweetheart," she said carefully, her voice gentle but measured. "She'll be there. But we must remember, everyone must behave kindly and carefully." Victory's face crinkled in confusion, but she accepted her mother's explanation with a nod and turned back to her toys, her mind already spinning with imagined wedding games. Philip was already at the kitchen counter, his morning coffee steaming, his gaze distant as he contemplated the coming days. He had noticed the small inconsistencies in Patricia's demeanor, those tiny moments that made him uneasy, but he had no proof, no reason beyond instinct to act. Yet instinct had kept him alive, had kept Lilith and Victory safe, and he would trust it now more than ever. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with a flurry of activity. Florists measured arrangements, bakers delivered tasting samples, and the boutique fittings reached their final, critical stages. Through it all, Patricia maintained her impeccable mask of a loving grandmother and remorseful mother. She arrived with freshly baked treats, offered to transport Lilith to appointments, and volunteered to oversee Victory's dress fittings, each gesture designed to cultivate trust and familiarity. Every smile, every gentle touch, every soft word was calculated, precise, and rehearsed. Yet even as she performed her part flawlessly, the old fire simmered beneath her polished exterior. The city lights reflected off her polished nails as she sat in her private study each evening, meticulously reviewing her plan for the wedding day. The bottle of clear liquid, small and unassuming, waited in its hidden drawer, a silent promise of the chaos to come. The thought of its power made her pulse quicken. In her mind's eye, she replayed the upcoming toasts, envisioning the exact moment Lilith would lift her glass, blissfully unaware, and the finality of her plan taking shape. One afternoon, as the Lecky apartment buzzed with activity, Patricia suggested a final fitting for Victory's dress before the big day. Victory, squealing with excitement, skipped ahead into the living room, already imagining herself as the center of a sunlit ceremony. Lilith, arms crossed, trailed behind, every sense alert. She watched Patricia closely, the woman's movements seemingly natural, warm, and gentle, yet Lilith could not shake the subtle undertones that whispered a caution. Patricia knelt beside Victory, adjusting the ribbons with precision, murmuring praise that seemed genuine. Yet the way her eyes lingered, the way she observed every reaction, reminded Lilith of a predator studying its prey. "You'll look perfect, Victory," Patricia said, her voice soft and seemingly loving. "The most beautiful flower in the sun." Victory beamed, and for a moment, Lilith's heart softened, the warmth of her daughter's innocence overshadowing her fear. But she knew better than to ignore the dissonance she sensed in Patricia's presence. "Mommy," Victory said, tugging at her hand, "is Grandma Pat really going to be nice at the wedding?" Lilith knelt beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her eyes. "Yes, baby," she said, voice firm but calm. "She's going to be nice. But remember, we always stay careful." Victory nodded, though her trust in her grandmother was already growing, and that made Lilith's gut tighten with unease. Philip watched silently, his jaw clenched as the scene unfolded. He had insisted on these supervised visits, insisting on observing Patricia's interactions at close quarters. Yet even he could not predict the depths of her patience, the meticulousness of her planning, nor the lengths she would go to reclaim control. The following week, Patricia orchestrated an elaborate family outing to a high-end amusement park. The plan, she told herself, was as much about gaining psychological control as it was about bonding. Every ride, every shared snack, every burst of laughter was carefully calibrated to create positive associations with her presence. She let Victory lead her through the park, allowed the little girl to choose games and prizes, while Lilith and Philip followed behind, constantly vigilant. At one point, Victory tugged Patricia toward the Ferris wheel. "Grandma Pat, come on, it's my turn to pick." Patricia's smile was radiant, almost maternal, as she allowed herself to be led. "Of course, my star," she said softly. Yet as she settled into the carriage, letting herself sway gently with the wheel, her mind raced through every eventuality. She calculated the angles, the timing, the perfect moment to ensure that the family's trust would be complete by the wedding day. Every instance of joy, every shared laugh, every careful gesture was a brick in the foundation of her deception. By the time the sun began to dip behind the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of molten gold and pink, Patricia had achieved exactly what she wanted. Lilith's tension had softened slightly. Philip's suspicion, though still present, was tempered by the apparent innocence of the day. Victory, unaware of the undercurrents around her, clung to Patricia, laughing freely, her small hands entwined with the woman's. Patricia's heart raced, not with love, but with the anticipation of the storm yet to come. Back at the mansion, Patricia meticulously reviewed her plan once more. She had accounted for every possible contingency, every possible interruption. She had memorized the layout of the beach resort, studied the placement of tables, seating arrangements, even the likely order of toasts. The poison, carefully contained and imperceptible, waited patiently, a silent instrument of her design. Her eyes gleamed with the reflection of candlelight, a spark of cruel satisfaction dancing across her face. 3 months, she whispered to herself. 3 months of playing the perfect mother, of earning trust, of lulling them into a false sense of security. And then, her words trailed off into the still night, a whisper swallowed by the echoes of the empty mansion. Then they will see who truly commands their fate. Despite Patricia's machinations, cracks began to appear, subtle but unmistakable. Lilith noticed small, inexplicable changes in Patricia's behavior, moments of cold calculation slipping through the warm facade. A fleeting smirk when she thought Lilith was distracted, a too quick glance at Victory that lingered with intent. Each observation was catalogued, stored for future reference, a silent warning that the perfect illusion might not hold. Philip, too, began to feel the pull of unease the old instinctive awareness that something was not quite right. He couldn't pinpoint it, yet every visit, every gesture, every carefully crafted smile from Patricia added to the tension that coiled in his chest. He found himself staying vigilant, planning contingencies, imagining worst-case scenarios that might protect Lilith and Victory for whatever darkness he sensed hovering just beyond reach. Even Victory, blissfully innocent, began to notice subtle tensions in the air, the slight furrow of Lilith's brow, the occasional tightness in Philip's jaw. Yet she remained largely unaffected, her world still bright, still full of laughter, still shimmering with the promise of a wedding that she had come to anticipate as the happiest moment of her young life. As the city lights twinkled beneath the deepening indigo sky, Patricia returned to the mansion, pouring herself a drink as she had done countless nights before. She sat alone, the quiet hum of the air conditioning the only companion to her thoughts. Her mind wandered across the coming wedding, over the toasts, the laughter, the unsuspecting joy of the family who had so easily embraced her deception. The bottle of poison rested in its secret place, a silent sentinel waiting for the day when the illusion would shatter. Patricia's smile was cold, precise, and unwavering. She traced the rim of her glass, imagining the moment when her plan would unfold perfectly, when the family's happiness would collapse in an instant, when she would reclaim the power and control she had once wielded so effortlessly. Soon, she whispered to herself, voice low and determined. Soon, they will learn that nothing is what it seems. And I will have everything. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythm, unaware of the storm gathering in the shadows, the silent threat poised at the edge of innocence, ready to descend. Inside the Lecky apartment, the family prepared for the wedding with cautious optimism, their joy tempered by memory and instinct. They could not yet know the darkness that had infiltrated their lives, the cold calculation behind the smiles they welcomed so openly. And somewhere, in the empty halls of a mansion lined with gold and marble, Patricia Johnson sat alone, plotting, waiting, savoring the approach of the day when her patience would yield ultimate power. The calm before the storm was nearly over. The days slipped into a rhythm of sunlit mornings and late-night preparations, a veneer of serenity stretched taut over the family's life. The apartment hummed with energy, florists delivering vibrant blooms, bakers perfecting the layered wedding cake, and stylists fussing over the subtle details of Lilith's hair and makeup. Victory's excitement bubbled endlessly, her small hands gripping invitations and miniature bouquets with delight, each giggle a fleeting light in the shadow that had begun to seep into their lives. Philip moved through the apartment with a constant, silent vigilance. He watched Patricia closely, noting every subtle glance, every minute twitch of her fingers, every almost imperceptible shift in expression that hinted at the woman's true intent. It was impossible to ignore the sharpness hidden behind her rehearsed warmth, a reminder of the storms she had once brought crashing into their lives. He had begun to sense the danger lurking beneath her charming veneer, even as Lilith struggled with the desire to trust, to believe that the mother who had once tormented them could truly be transformed. Patricia's visits became increasingly calculated, each one carefully timed and orchestrated. She would arrive with gifts for Victory, handmade ribbons, tiny gold charms, delicate trinkets, and accompany the child as she practiced walking down the aisle of the beach resort in her miniature dress. Each gesture, each laugh, each gentle encouragement was meticulously designed to cultivate trust, not just from Victory, but from Lilith as well. Lilith, though wary, found herself letting her guard down incrementally. She watched Patricia guide her daughter's tiny hands along the folds of the dress, helping Victory straighten a bow or adjust a ribbon. There was a gentleness to the woman's touch that seemed almost real, almost maternal, and Lilith caught herself thinking, perhaps she has changed. But the thought was always immediately tempered by memory, the coldness, the threats, the years of cruelty that had driven her into survival mode. One afternoon, as the three generations gathered in the living room for a final fitting, The tension was nearly palpable. Patricia crouched to Victory's level, her hands smoothing the delicate fabric of the gown, her face lit with a smile that seemed unreachably warm. "You're going to shine on that beach, Victory," she said softly, her eyes glinting with a depth of emotion Lilith couldn't fully read. Victory's small hands clutched Patricia's, her innocent trust like a fragile flame. "Will you walk with me, Grandma Pat?" she asked, eyes bright with anticipation. Lilith swallowed hard. The request should have been simple, joyous, but the layers of unease that clung to Patricia's presence made the question feel loaded with risk. "Of course, baby," Patricia said smoothly. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Philip, standing just behind, felt his heart tighten. He noticed the fleeting micro-expression that passed across Patricia's face, a shadow of something darker, something unspoken, and his instincts flared. He placed a hand gently on Lilith's shoulder. "Keep an eye on her," he murmured. Lilith nodded subtly, eyes flicking to Patricia, who was now softly adjusting Victory's ribbons again, the small motions masking her meticulous scrutiny of the child's behavior. Later that evening, after Victory had been tucked in and the apartment had fallen quiet, Lilith sat on the balcony with Philip. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath them, the sounds of distant traffic and faint music drifting from nearby streets. Lilith's fingers twisted a silver bracelet nervously. "I want to believe she's changed," she said quietly. "I really do. But I can't shake this feeling that she's hiding something. There's a darkness there I can't ignore." Philip drew her close, pressing his lips against the top of her head. "I feel it too," he admitted. "Every visit, every smile, every gift, there's always that split second, that shadow. I can't put my finger on it, but it's there, and I don't trust it." Lilith leaned into him, breathing in his calm, the warmth of his embrace offering a temporary reprieve from the gnawing fear. "We'll be careful," she said softly. "We have to be. For Victory." Philip nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon as though he could see beyond the city lights into the very heart of the danger he sensed. "We'll protect her no matter what, and we'll watch her every step." Meanwhile, at the mansion, Patricia's true self began to reassert its presence more insistently. Her nightly routine was ritualistic, reviewing plans, studying schedules, memorizing every detail of the resort, every possible seating arrangement, every potential interruption that could derail her carefully laid plan. The poison sat in its secret drawer, a constant reminder of the finality that awaited her enemies. She rehearsed the wedding day in her mind, step by step, minute by minute. She envisioned Lilith raising her glass for the toast, the golden liquid shimmering under the sunlit sky, the perfect moment to deliver the silent blow that would dismantle the family's happiness. Her heart raced at the thought, her pulse quickening with anticipation. Every detail mattered. Every delay, every smile, every shared glance between the couple, every distraction, all meticulously timed to ensure success. Patricia poured herself a drink, the amber liquid catching the light of the crystal chandelier. Her reflection in the mirror stared back at her, a woman composed, elegant, unassuming. Yet beneath the surface lurked the predator, calculating, patient, and utterly relentless. She whispered to herself, a chilling calm in her voice, "Soon, very soon, and they won't even see it coming." Back at the apartment, the wedding preparations moved into overdrive. Invitations had been mailed, RSVPs collected, seating charts finalized. Every logistical detail seemed to fall into place, almost as if the universe itself were conspiring to create a perfect day. The couple, caught up in a whirlwind of excitement, began to allow themselves moments of bliss, glimpses of the life they had fought so hard to build. Victory, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her, ran through the apartment, twirling in her dress, her laughter spilling into every corner. "Mommy, Daddy, I can't wait. The beach, the sand, the sun," she squealed, her excitement infectious. Lilith smiled, her heart full, but a shadow of doubt remained in the corners of her mind, fueled by the lingering memories of Patricia's past cruelty. Patricia, arriving with a carefully chosen selection of gifts for the couple, played her role to perfection. Her smile was warm, her words gentle, her gestures precise. Yet every movement was laced with intent, every glance measured. She observed the placement of the cake table, the arrangement of chairs, the flow of sunlight across the resort layout she had memorized. Each detail would be crucial on the day she had planned, the day her patience and cunning would come to fruition. One evening, as the family sat down to a quiet dinner, Lilith finally voiced the thoughts that had been gnawing at her for weeks. "Philip," she said, her tone hesitant, "I can't shake the feeling that she's planning something. I know she seems sincere, but there's a part of me that remembers who she really is." Philip's fork paused midway to his mouth. He had sensed it too, the subtle manipulations, the hidden glances, the careful cultivation of trust. "I feel it," he admitted, lowering his gaze. "We've seen what she's capable of. We have to be ready. We can't let our guard down, not for a second." Victory looked between them, sensing the tension, though she could not understand it fully. "Mommy, Daddy, why are you whispering? What's wrong?" Lilith forced a smile, reaching across to gently squeeze her daughter's hand. "Nothing, baby," she said softly. "Just grown-up stuff. We'll handle it. You don't need to worry." Victory accepted this, returning to her plate with a contented sigh, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. As night fell, Patricia returned to the mansion, the empty rooms echoing with the click of her heels against the marble floors. She poured herself a drink, settling into her chair with the elegance of a queen surveying her domain. The plan was nearly complete. The pieces were all in place. The family's trust, so painstakingly cultivated, had lulled them into a false sense of security. The poison remained hidden, a silent instrument of her ultimate power, waiting for the precise moment to fulfill her design. She traced the rim of her glass, imagining the scene in vivid detail. The sun reflecting off the ocean, the golden sand beneath their feet, Lilith raising her glass for the toast, the perfect moment when her control would be absolute. Her lips curved into a smile, cold and predatory. "Soon," she whispered, the single word resonating in the silent mansion. "And then, I will have everything. My son, my empire, my family." Outside, the city continued to hum, oblivious to the darkness that had crept so close to the heart of a family who had dared to hope. Inside the apartment, Lilith and Philip prepared for the wedding with cautious optimism, unaware of the shadow that had silently positioned itself, waiting to strike. The calm before the storm was nearing its end, and the first ripples of chaos had already begun to stir beneath the surface.